So in the interest of time, I'll get started. Thanks so much for coming today. My name is Vanessa Oliver, and I'm one of the dietitians with the UK Health and Wellness Program. I see a lot of familiar faces out there, and I know there's some familiar names out there that maybe I haven't met in person, so hi. And this is Class 1 of the CSA voucher class series, okay? This is a new class, brand new, and the other classes will be very sort of cooking demo heavy. This one's going to be a little bit more of me talking, okay? I am going to demonstrate some techniques. You'll get to taste some food also, but this one's just a little bit different in structure. So if you're expecting more sort of recipes and cooking live, the June, July, August, September classes, which you can sign up for now online, will be more in that vein, okay? But I just wanted to sort of do this because there are a lot more people who are using the CSA voucher this year, and a lot of people might be using it for the first time. So it can be a little bit daunting to know that you've already paid for vegetables, they're coming to your house, or you're picking them up, and you got to cook them because you don't want them to be like some kind of crazy wasteland in your refrigerator, right? Now, who do I have who's a first-time CSAer this year? Okay, great. So several of you. Okay. And who is starting today? Anyone? Okay, so a couple of you have UK CSA, all right. And then we've got a mixture. Do I have any Elmwood people? Elmwood folks, okay. Sustainable Harvest, okay. Lazy 8, okay. And, oh my gosh, who am I forgetting? The other one? No? Okay, well, that's good. No one's here anyway. Okay. So some of you have already been experiencing the CSA for as much as almost 4 weeks or so, 3 or 4 weeks. And then some of you are just starting. So those of you who have been experiencing the CSA for a little bit, have there been any bumps in the road? No? Are you pleasantly surprised by that? You know it's going to get bumpy, right? Okay. Hopefully not really bumpy necessarily, but in the beginning of the season, right, the boxes are a little bit smaller, okay? And you will definitely be seeing the opposite of that once it gets into prime harvest season in Kentucky, which is usually late June up through August, September, okay? So right now, you know, everyone's happy because there's asparagus, right? Maybe there's some strawberries, there's some lettuce so you can make salad, and you guys know what to do with that sort of stuff, okay? Have there been any weird things yet?
Bok choy.
Bok choy.
Which
you had bok choy.
I actually did okay with.
Okay, okay, awesome. Yeah, so I didn't realize anyone was getting any bok choy yet, so that's pretty good. Yeah, and bok choy is one of those things that if you're not familiar with it, you can be like, what is this weird cabbagey thing? And you actually wouldn't be far off, right, if you were just to treat it like cabbage. What did you end up doing with it, if you don't mind
I
asking?
actually sauteed it with some onions and the asparagus and chicken and some rice.
Nice. So you sauteed it with onion, chicken, asparagus, and some rice. And I'm repeating so everyone can hear.
Soy sauce, and I had a peanut sauce.
Oh, fantastic.
So it actually wound up.
That sounds really good. Now, was that recipe in the newsletter?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you went rogue.
Yes.
That's yeah. Now, some of those unusual vegetables you will see recipes for, and the not so unusual vegetables, you'll see recipes for in a newsletter, whether it's a paper newsletter that you get with your weekly box or bag, or an online. Sometimes you'll see it in a blog or on a website or in an email instead. So I encourage you to make sure that you are getting some sort of weekly email from your farm. And if you're not, and you think it might be going to your clutter or to your spam, make sure it's not, because it's going to be full of good information, okay? Anyone else get anything weird? No? Okay, good. The garlic scapes are coming, okay? So those of you who have UK CSA, that will be coming soon. Garlic scapes are great. I'm just going to tell you, I love them. They're one of my favorite things, and they're very unusual. It's not something that you can buy in the store. I did do some recipes for garlic scapes last year as part of this series, so you can always check out some of my tips with those if you get stuck. But usually the farmers know that people are a little unfamiliar with those, so they'll include some tips. Okay. Any other sorts of, any questions or any topics that you wanted to make sure that I covered today? Okay. Well, what we'll be doing today, I'm going to start with some sort of cooking and storage tips for some of your vegetables. I'll go into some non-cooking tips, more like emotional health when it comes to your CSA, okay? And then also some maybe meal preparation ideas, all right? And along the way, I'll demonstrate some techniques, like I mentioned. So the first thing that you're going to do when you get your box, hopefully, is take it out, take everything out and put it on the counter, right? Get everything out of the bag, get everything out of the box, and look at it. And make sure you know what everything is, okay? Because sometimes you might just be like, oh, I don't know, I'm just going to stick that back in there and don't worry about it, right? But this way you can see if anything needs a little bit of extra storage help, for example. You can match what's supposed to be there according to what you have, because sometimes there might be a packing error. You might want to contact your farm, right? So I really do recommend that you identify each veg and see how it's going to be best to store it. And again, that newsletter may give you some storage tips, but I'm going to give you some here too. So if you're sort of balancing between refrigerator or room temperature, all right, and you might be, and especially once the season progresses and you start like making bargains with the refrigerator, like just one more thing. Right? So I find that leafy greens, not only leafy greens, but most produce does well in the refrigerator, okay? The first thing you want to make sure about your refrigerator is that it's at the proper temperature. Do y'all know what that temperature should be? Okay, you want it to be 40 degrees, okay? Now, a lot of newer refrigerators have that digital temperature gauge near the door, all right? And if it doesn't, if you have an older one, go on and get one of those little cheap thermometers. There's a little hook on it. You can hang it from one of the wire racks in your fridge. Hang it toward the back, okay, because that's going to be a truer gauge of the temperature, all right? And you want it to be around 40. Now, you can even, if you have the ability to turn it down to about maybe 39, and that'll keep things just a little bit cooler, a little bit fresher, okay, without freezing anything. And then thinking, too, about the kind of hardiness of a particular vegetable can help. So if you know that you have cool spots and warm spots in your fridge beyond what is usually a cool spot or warm spot, so generally the door is a little bit warmer and the front's a little bit warmer because that's, you know, you open the fridge. Or if you have a 4-year-old that like sits in front of, or a husband and just sits there. So some things, you know, once you figure out exactly what those temperature zones are in your refrigerator, you may not want to put the very delicate things like spinach, for example, in the back because it may freeze. All right, you may want to keep it in the crisper drawer, which tends to be a little bit more regulated, which tends to be a little bit drier, so you can sort of, and also hopefully it's clear so you can see what's in there. If your crisper drawer is not clear or it tends to get cramped, I do recommend keeping a sort of inventory list on the front of your refrigerator so you know what's in there. Because, I mean, I've definitely found some questionable things in my crisper drawer, right? And you don't want to do that. Again, you've paid for this. You want it, you're participating in the CSA so you can enjoy new vegetables. And it's no fun if they go bad before you can eat them, okay? So once you've got your refrigerator sort of squared away, you can put your carrots, eggplant, zucchini, peppers, all sorts of things in the fridge. Your leafy greens. When you are storing them, I usually like to keep them in unsealed plastic bags. Some people don't like plastic. I totally understand that. It's just something that I have around. I keep them unsealed because it allows any ethylene, which is a gas that builds up on ripening produce, to escape because it does hasten the ripening of fruits and vegetables. There are other options, though. For example, there are clear storage containers that have vents to allow that ethylene gas to escape. Reuseit.com is a great website where you can get a lot of these types of sort of refrigerator organizers, okay? You can also find some at places like TJ Maxx or Home Goods or that kind of thing. But the clearer your storage container, again, the better chance you have of actually seeing and knowing what's in there and using it, okay? Major exception to the refrigerator rule is tomatoes, right? So you want to keep your tomatoes out at room temp. Keep them stem side down, because if you think about it, the stem is where they've been cut from the plant, so that has a capacity for a little bit more cell breakage. It's that cell breakage that can encourage rot, essentially, right? So if you keep the stem side down, it's going to be extending the life of the tomato just a little bit, okay? If you're going to cook your tomatoes anyway, you can actually keep them in the refrigerator, but if you want them to be like nice for like a sandwich or something like that, or a salad, you're going to eat them raw, then they're going to have the best texture and flavor if you leave them out at room temp. Okay, yes?
That why for best texture and flavor, is that why they say don't put them in the fridge?
Yeah, basically. I mean, there's some other sort of biochemical reasons too, but you're not going to hurt yourself if you put them in the refrigerator. So like sometimes if your house runs really warm, for example, in August, and you know that you're going to have a fruit fly explosion if you leave them on the counter, go on and put them in the fridge. I mean, you're just going to be better off. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay. But other sorts of heartier vegetables like garlic, root vegetables, onions, sweet potatoes, any other tuber, keep those at room temperature. Free up that storage. Okay, hanging baskets are nice, or just have some bowls on the counter. Again, you want to be able to see them, but those don't need to be refrigerated. So once you've got everything out on your counter, you also want to look and see if there's any sort of additional things you need to do to your vegetables before you store them. Okay, so for example, if there's a rubber band or a twist tie around the vegetable themselves, anything that could potentially, again, be encouraging that cell breakage, then you would want to take that off, okay, and just, you know, throw them in the cup or the drawer that you put all the rubber bands in. And again, that's going to increase the sort of shelf life of your vegetables. And you'll see that sometimes on things like lettuce, on greens, herbs sometimes. So take off and the twisty tie or the rubber band. And that's good advice for anything you get from the grocery store as well. Okay. Once you, another tip too, is if you have any roots vegetables, like has anyone gotten radishes? I know some of us have, right? Remove the green leafy tops from your root vegetables for two reasons. Okay. One is they will take moisture out of the root themselves. The leaves will kind of suck up the moisture, and so that can dry out your root a little faster. And the other thing is that their storage time is different. Okay, you'll notice that if you leave those leafy tops on the roots, the leaves will go bad, they'll get all slimy, it'll cover the root in like nasty stuff, and even though it's probably still okay to eat, it looks gross and you're just going to throw the whole thing away, right? So go on and separate them and keep them stored separately, okay? What else? So once you've got your lettuces or your greens, who washes them before they, like, first and then stores them? Do I have anyone who does that? Okay, so you wash as you go. All right. There's two schools of thought on this. Both of them are valid, okay? If you wash before you eat, fine, no worries. You can still use a technique, though, that I'm going to show you now. If you wash and then store for later, then you want to be really careful about how you store them, because you want to store them pretty dry, okay? You don't want that water to kind of pool or build up and, again, encourage that sort of slime factor. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, even though most of your veggies will have been washed at least once before you get them, because that encourages shelf life, you'll probably want to wash them again, okay? I mean, I know that the farm that I got this lettuce from washed this lettuce. However, I'm looking at it, and there's dirt, all right, especially toward the bottom. And if you know, like with greens and lettuces, that's where that dirt's going to collect, right? So a good way to do this is either to fill up a bowl or your sink with cold water and put your lettuce in there, or your other greens, okay? And just sort of like, you know, zhuzh them around, all right? You want it to be cold water, and you want to be able to at least get those real dirty parts covered with the water, okay? Incidentally, this method can also be used to refresh any greens or herbs that look a little bit wilted. Maybe your bag got left in your car or on someone's porch for a while, and you get your spinach and it looks kind of like how you feel at the end of the day. You can use this method of soaking in cold water to revive other sort of leafy greens, that kind of thing. But right now we're washing. So go on, and you can always get some of the more stubborn dirt kind of off. And when you are satisfied with the kind of cleanliness level of your leaves, lift them out of the water, either in the bowl or in the sink. Don't pour the water over, because if you do that, you're just pouring the dirt back on your leaves, right? So lift them out, okay? And you can, does anyone have a salad spinner? Does anyone, who does not have a salad spinner? Because I totally recommend one. Okay. When you have these leaves, like when you're getting lettuce and greens every week, a salad spinner can make your life a lot easier. Those of you who have one kind of will know, right? And a nice, inexpensive one is that OXO brand. You can find them anywhere. There's different sizes. Yeah, I highly recommend them. And you can use them for lettuce. You can use them for leafy greens. You can use them for herbs, even some other delicate vegetables. Okay. But if you don't have one yet, once you take your lettuce out, you can grab a length of paper towel or a tea towel if you have one of those. Okay. Go on and wrap it up and sort of gently squeeze the moisture out. And then you can take this little bundle and store that in an unopened or unsealed plastic bag. And this will extend the life of your produce by at least a week. All right? Any of those leafy greens, leafy herbs, anything. And you can do this again with your grocery store produce as well. Okay? So take away any constriction, wash, wrap in some sort of absorbent device, and put in your plastic bag. Okay. Another tip for herbs, if you don't want to do it this way, there's also an alternative. You can store any sort of greens with longer stems or herbs in a jar with water, right? You can either put it on the counter, okay, so it can be pretty, or you can put them in the refrigerator, and you can even go as far to put a small Ziploc baggie over the jar, okay? And that will also extend for herbs particularly. Some people, if they have small children at home or clumsy husbands, don't want to keep an open jar of water in the refrigerator because that can just lead to disaster. But and incidentally, when you get your garlic scapes, those can also be stored that way. If you've never seen them, they're really sort of neat and twisty, and they make sort of a nice bouquet, just for fun. Okay? So that's a good tip for storing your greens. Let's see. Any questions about any other kind of storage? Yes.
Really quickly, so you were saying about tubers, and I know like potatoes and onions, those
Yes.
are all room temperature. What about like turnips, beets, radishes you mentioned? Are those kind of, I usually keep them in the fridge.
I usually keep those in the fridge. Yeah, I've kept turnips out before, but I find they get soft.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a pretty high sugar content in those, so they will get soft pretty quickly. I put them in the crisper, and I will put them in a plastic bag also, unclosed, and they'll stay good forever, as long as you take those tops off.
Yeah, and I tend to do the same thing. It's just that's a lot of real estate. And so if there was another way.
I know. Well, if you have a root cellar. Anyone have a root cellar? Some people do. And remember, if you have a below ground basement, and if you have shelves, that can be an alternative, right? Because remember, if it's below ground, it's always going to be like around 56 degrees or so, which is good storage temperature for sweet potatoes and tubers and that kind of thing. So start digging. Okay, so now that you've got everything sort of identified, stored, and put away, you need to have a game plan, right? So the first sort of step for this game plan is maybe switching up the way that you think about each vegetable, all right? So maybe you had something when you were like 8 years old, and it was raw, and you hated it, and you're never going to eat it again. It happens, right? I hear that all the time, okay? Maybe now you have different tastes because you're grown up, right? So the first thing is, if you've never had something raw, and if it's edible raw, and if you need to figure it out, do a quick Google search and you can figure it out. But taste it raw and see what you think. All right, so I'm going to pass around some raw spinach. You can just pick it up by the stem. I think most of you have probably had spinach in a salad, okay? But I will say that, and don't feel obligated. If you don't want to eat it, you don't have to. But spinach that's locally grown and just picked, it's a little bit sweet. you know, and it's not as tough. And the particular greens that a lot of our farmers are choosing have these qualities, right? They're a little bit more tender, they've got more flavor. And again, you're just sort of experimenting and seeing what you like, what you don't like, all right? But you want to sort of challenge your assumptions about the vegetable. So does this spinach taste any different than other spinach that you've had? I think this is a particularly sweet variety, right? And you can tell the leaves are different than what you would find in the grocery store, okay? These are more of like an arrowhead sort of shape. So, you know, just sort of challenge your assumptions a little bit. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say when you're planning is to look at the quantity of what you've received, okay? Because sometimes, you know, you'll get the beets, but there's going to be like 2. And they might be kind of small. And if you have a family of 5, then that's not going to go too far, okay? So what would you guys do if you have a larger family and you got 2 beets? Would you use them? Yeah? How would you use them? I don't know, right? So you might sort of identify if something that you got in your basket is going to be used like as a vegetable side or as a garnish. Okay, or as an ingredient in something else. And that's going to sort of dictate what sorts of recipes you look for. Okay, so if something is a garnish, and this is particularly useful if you get like just a few leaves of basil, which might happen. It's not enough to make pesto. You know, it's like barely enough to put in tomato sauce, but maybe it's enough to sprinkle on top of like pasta or something. I'm going to show you a chiffonade technique that can be used for any sort of leafy green or herb. It's going to be similar in effect to like a julienne, right, which is the tiny little strips. And that was something that you would use for like a beet or a radish or something if you only got a couple of them. So what I'm doing here is with any chiffonade that you're going to do, any leaf, you want to first take the stem off, okay? For some of the smaller leaves, the stem will be really tender and edible. You know, certainly herb stems are edible. They have a lot of flavor. Just most people tend to not use them. Tougher stems like these, they are edible, okay? And there are whole books on how to use other things that you would otherwise throw away or designate as kitchen trash, okay? I'm not going to talk about that today. But if you wanted to eat these, you could certainly peel them and steam them, and they would be tasty, okay? Things that are in the middle would be like spinach stems or Swiss chard stems. I usually cut those up and saute them with onion and put my greens in that way. But we're going to discard the kale stem right now. And then to chiffonade, you're going to take your larger pieces, and you're going to stack them together, okay? Now, who went to the meet and greet event? I know a few of you did. Okay, so this is a technique that our guest chef was able to demonstrate for you all. So if you weren't able to see him, then maybe you can see me here. So what he did was he stacked these larger pieces like this, and then you roll it up like a cigar or a burrito. And you take your knife, which is hopefully sharp, okay, and which you are holding, by the way, like a tennis racket or like you're shaking someone's hand. All right, I know this looks like a big and scary knife, but because I'm holding it properly, it just feels like an extension of my arm, okay? And you just take your knife and run it across the cigar shape. Notice I'm not doing this, okay? I'm always got the tip of my knife on the board. It's nice and quiet, and that gives me a lot of control. Notice also that I'm moving my fingers away as I'm cutting, okay? And I don't have my fingers out like this. I do have my fingers like this. Because by doing so, if I do hit my fingers with the knife, I'm just hitting the knuckle, and it almost acts as a knife guard, okay? So it's a little bit of safety, particularly when you are working with wet produce, all right? You want to make sure that you're using as many safety tips as possible, okay? When I do this, I'm left with sort of a nice kind of ribbon. And this is, you can see how this would be pretty on top of pasta or on another finished dish. And it's just a way to, you know, again, use everything that's in your bag or box in sort of a fun way. And what I'm going to do, actually, with this is saute it for you. And just to show you, again, a very sort of simple preparation. Okay, I've got some onion in here that was just sauteing in olive oil, a little bit of salt. All right, I'm going to go on and throw these in there. It might spatter because these are a little wet, but I turned the heat down. So, and chiffonading like this, even if you're doing it with greens like I just did, okay, this is a great technique to lessen that real estate in your refrigerator. See how much, this was a whole bunch of kale, okay? Now see how little room this is taking up? You could do this ahead of time, all right? Go on and pack it in a container like this. I would put a paper towel on top just to sort of regulate the moisture, okay? But then they're ready to go. They're already washed, they're already cut. You don't have to deal with it when you get home, okay? And you can put it in a lot of different things. So saute would be a really easy sort of thing. I think a lot of people think about that. Maybe add a little garlic, because garlic is good. Another way to take up even less room in your refrigerator is to go on and blanch your greens. All right, now do y'all know what I mean by blanching? Some of you do, some of you don't. Okay, so blanching means that you set your vegetable or fruit in simmering water, all right, just under a boil. And you go on and let it sit there until it kind of collapses. And for different vegetables, it'll be a different amount of time. But I particularly like doing this with greens. And let's be honest, y'all are going to get a lot of greens. Okay, for those of you who have experienced the CSA already, you know this. I like to do this for greens because not only does it shrink down your storage needs, but it also will encourage the color to stay nice and bright green, even though it's cooked. Because once it cooks down like this, then I'm putting it in a bowl of ice water. And that ice water is shocking the color into the greens. Okay? And you can let it sit in this ice water until it's cool. So you saw how much I put in there. There's not much to it left now, right? And once it's cooked like this, let me make sure I turn, then again, you can use it in a variety of things, all right? You would be able to put it in some pasta sauce. You'd be able to maybe put it in a frittata or omelet. You could wrap it up, squeeze out the water, and freeze it for later in the season. Make sure you label anything that you stick in that freezer, okay? But there are a ton of things that you can do with it. And I've found also that when you take what are known as the bitter greens, so maybe kale, mustard, turnip greens, collard greens, and do this blanch and shock, it takes a little bit of that bitterness out. So if these are new greens to you, then you might try that if you're having a little bit of trouble tolerating that bitterness. Okay? You might learn to love the bitterness. Okay? Embrace the bitter. But you can see also, now I did these yesterday, and see how there's still that nice bright green color? They don't look gray or olive green or anything like that. So it really does sort of help keep that color. And let's be honest, we eat with our eyes first, right? So anything that's going to be visually appealing, particularly when it comes to vegetables that might be unfamiliar, is going to be helpful. All right, set that aside. Any questions right now?
By cutting up the greens, does that affect the storage time at all? Because I found that I have tried to throw together a big salad that I'm going to eat on all week.
Yes.
And that does not work.
Do you dress the salad when you
No,
do it? Okay.
no.
Do you put other vegetables in there?
Usually it's just different types of lettuce with some spinach.
Okay. It might, so if you're tearing the lettuce, then again, you're disrupting those cells, and you are possibly encouraging some bacteria to enter, right? So when you do that, you want to make sure it's washed really well and it's dried really well. Any sort of residual moisture is going to encourage that kind of slime factor. Okay, so that could be, and if anything is pooling in the bottom, then that could definitely be an issue. Paper towels are, super helpful with this, or like I said, tea towels are very helpful as well. One thing that if you are using a salad spinner, you can actually store your lettuce in the spinner and put that in the refrigerator. And that will help keep things good for a week as well. Okay? And then incidentally, if you do want to make salads ahead of time, and I know I've talked to some of you about this before, but there's that whole salad in a jar technique. Okay? It is awesome. Seriously, I've been eating a salad in a jar every day for lunch for like the last 2 years. No joke. My husband does too. Neither of us are sick of it. You can put different things in there, and that lettuce stays good, because you're separating it from the moisture. Yeah. So that's something else to consider too, and it looks really cute. Feel all satisfied when you open up your fridge and it looks all Instagrammy or whatever. Okay. So I've shown you some ways to sort of decrease that storage, shown you some ways to prep your greens for later use. I'm going to talk about some ways that you can use them in different types of foods, okay? But all of this really can be summed up by just making sure that you plan ahead. And it can be a little bit of a new language, okay? Absolutely. So anything that you can do to make that easier for yourself, do it. If you need to put reminders on your phone or on your calendar to use certain vegetables, certainly have your pickup as a little phone or calendar alert, because otherwise it's really easy to forget, right? Think about what recipes that you might want to use ahead of time. Now, a lot of the recipes that I'm going to talk about, or the methods I'm going to talk about here in a minute, are things that can be used for all different kinds of vegetables. So hopefully you'll get some ideas there too, okay? But also when you're planning ahead, try to use those fragile vegetables the soonest, okay? And then know which ones will store longer and use that accordingly, okay? So you may not have to use the turnips right away. And we've already gotten turnips, so those of us who are doing Elmwood, yeah, which is crazy. So try to make a rough plan of what you're going to cook each day so that you don't, run out of veggies or have too many leftovers or something like that. Okay. So those are all sort of the cooking tips, all right? The non-cooking sort of emotional health tips that I was mentioning earlier. When you are faced with kale for the 13th week in a row, try not to get cranky. I know it's hard, right? It's hard. And you want to just sort of embrace that bounty, okay? Realize how much work has gone into that kale. Talk to your farmers about it. Learn about all of the things that they've done in order to get those veggies to you in a fresh and beautiful state, okay? Some of your farms will have open farm tour days. Some of them may have already had those days. Learn as much as you can about the process that brings that basket to you, and you will appreciate those vegetables even more. Conversely, you may not get as much as you want of some things, okay? There are going to be uneven quantities. The harvest determines everything, all right? What determines the harvest? Generally the weather, okay, which we can't control as much as we would like to, all right, especially today, right? So you may not be able to get all of your produce for the summer from that CSA, okay? Particularly your staples like onions and garlic and that kind of thing. You may have to buy those from the store. Fruit. CSAs are not fruit heavy, okay? Some of us have gotten strawberries, but that's not going to happen for everybody, all right? Everyone has different things in their baskets. So know, again, that you might have to supplement with either the store or the farmer's market. You do want to be realistic about your storage space, okay? So if you're like, yeah, I can freeze everything, make sure you have a big freezer. Make sure your freezer is cleaned out from like 2 years ago, okay? If you think maybe you're going to can everything and learn how to do that, make sure you've got shelf space. Make sure you know how to do the canning, okay? I can certainly help you with some one-on-one just like tips, but County Extension has canning classes. Sign up now. They fill up pretty quickly, okay? And if you do want to preserve food for the winter in that way, either freezing or canning, talk to your farmer about getting larger quantities, and they'll be able to most likely deliver those quantities to you along with your share, okay? So that's something that you'll want to start talking about early. Make sure you understand pickup policies with your each individual farm. Everyone is different. So if you know you're going away on vacation, let them know in advance. Some farmers will prorate and give you some money back. Most of them won't. Okay, so you're going to have to arrange with a friend or a neighbor to pick up your share. Decide if you want them to eat your strawberries or not. all right? But know what those policies are in advance so you don't have some sort of emotional interchange with your farmer, okay? The Kentucky Harvest Calendar is something that you all have in front of you now, and the reason why I brought that today is so you all can see when things come, all right? So you're not still expecting strawberries in July, and you're wondering where the tomatoes are, okay? So this can at least give you an idea of what to expect when, all right? And it can, again, help with that planning ahead. But your main takeaway here is being flexible, okay? You don't have a lot of control over what you get, okay? You're going to get foods that you know and love, and you're going to get foods that you don't, okay? But that's part of the sort of glory that is the CSA. And knowing that ahead of time can sometimes help with that emotional state, okay? Okay. Any questions about that sort of stuff? Okay, so I'm going to get to the meal ideas here. Does anyone have any sort of formulas that they already use? No? Okay. So one thing that I know you guys already know, but I'm going to just sort of put it out there, is having theme nights. All right? So maybe Meatless Monday. All right? Maybe Taco Tuesday. Okay? Maybe it's Pizza Friday. Who knows? Fun Friday? I don't know. But thinking about ways that you can at least take some of the thinking and planning out. And there are lots of things you can do with tacos, with pizza, with your crock pot. Okay? And just having that sort of designation for each day of the week can be super helpful. But getting beyond that, I'm going to talk about different kinds of foods and how you can use your produce, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about are smoothies. You know about the green smoothies. Who likes the green smoothies? Yay! Who hates the green smoothies? Anyone hasn't tried them? Okay. Okay. So that's good. I had some people last night who were like, no. So the green smoothie is a great way. Even the kale can be put in your green smoothie, right? If you throw a frozen banana in there, all is well. You will just taste the banana. And if it really freaks you out, don't put it in a clear glass, and you'll never know what you're drinking, okay? So certainly smoothies, and then you get your veggies at breakfast, which can be a challenge, okay? Let's see. Another thing that you can do, I should have mentioned this with the greens. If you are just stuck and you don't want to deal with your greens right now, which may happen, go on and take the stems out, do this blanching technique that I mentioned, and since you've got your blender out because you've been making your smoothies, go on and puree your greens with a little bit of water and make, like a looser puree, okay? And then freeze that in ice cube trays. Once they're frozen, pop them out and put them in plastic bags. This is also a good technique for fresh herbs, by the way. But then you just have a little pop of nutrition that you can throw into soups, pasta sauces, rice cooking water, chili. It's a great way just to be like, yeah, I've got these green cubes. I'll just throw them in there. I don't know what they are. You can even put them in your smoothies. Okay, but it's another way to sort of, again, decrease that storage space with your greens, okay? Another great way to use up vegetables, certainly omelets or frittatas. I mentioned that. Even chopping up vegetables and putting them in egg salad. For those of you who are doing Elmwood, we have those pea shoots right now. Has anyone gotten those? They're really good in like egg salad and tuna salad, strangely. Try that. Certainly pasta sauce. And I'm not even only talking about tomato sauce here. You can think beyond the tomato and do like a garlic and oil or a cream sauce and go on and do that as well. Roasting vegetables is probably my favorite tip, okay? Almost any vegetable can be roasted. Sheet pan, 400 degrees, 20 minutes, salt and olive oil. That's all anything needs. Certainly you can do other sort of flavors, but any vegetable from greens to turnips to potatoes to radishes can be roasted and delicious. And when you do that, they caramelize, you bring the sugars to the surface, so you get to experience a little bit of a different flavor. If anyone has to go, I've got some things that you can take with you too. So I saw you putting your jacket on there, but they're packed up with lids, so you can bring. I've got green hummus that has been made with 4 cups of spinach into a hummus recipe. And I've also got some homemade ranch dressing because I know lots of people want some ranch to go with their veggies, and I can get behind that. So this is going to be a little bit healthier. It's made with Greek yogurt, and I also have some ranch packs that are just the dried herbs that you can take with you as well. Okay, so if you do have to leave before I'm done talking, please come on up and grab some of that, okay? Okay, but I'm almost done. Some other ideas, of course, soups and stews. Okay, so a lot of classic soups and stews already include vegetables. Similar to sauces, soups and stews will often simmer a while, so you can really cook down quite a lot of vegetables in there. Okay, sautéing, we covered that already. Especially with garlic, everything's better with garlic, right? Shredded. Now, when you get the kohlrabi, and I know people are worried about the kohlrabi. We'll talk about this later in the season. Shredded kohlrabi is delicious. You can do that with cabbage, with bok choy, with radishes, with carrots. Again, finely shredded. You can eat them as is, raw, and make a slaw, put them on top of salad, put them in a wrap, put them in egg salad or tuna salad, okay? But again, you're decreasing that storage space that you need, and you're increasing the likelihood that you are going to use that vegetable later. I just mentioned wraps. Greens make a great wrapper. Okay, you can use lettuce, you can use collard greens, kale greens, even mustard greens to wrap. If you do it, sometimes it's a little helpful if, again, you take out that center stem, and you'll notice that things will roll just a little bit easier. So not only can you use them as the wrap themselves, but then you can put your veggies in your wrap. And the two spreads that I've got here would also be really nice in there as well as like a little bit of a binder. The last two that I've got, pesto. Pesto is not just for basil. Has anyone tried making an alternative pesto out of other greens? Which one have you done? Kale pesto? You also? Yep. Yeah, it's really good, right? Because once, again, you put that garlic in there, you put in the cheese, you put in the nuts and olive oil, it's delicious, right? And you can use a lot. Arugula is also good for pesto. Radish greens, actually. Carrot tops. You can make pesto out of anything. All pesto means is pounded in Italian because it used to be made in a mortar and pestle. So if you pound something with garlic and nuts and olive oil, it's pesto, all right? And again, you can also freeze that and use it later. I would recommend if you do that, leave the cheese out and add it later on as you eat it, all right? And then lastly, the dips. So not only can you dip your vegetables into dip, but you can make your vegetables into dip, okay? And that's what I did with that green hummus there. So that is a traditional hummus recipe. It's flavored with a little lime instead of lemon, just because I was keeping the green theme. But it's got some cumin, and like I said, 4 cups of spinach in a batch of hummus, and came out pretty good. So think about using different ways that you can make dips with vegetables as that main ingredient. You can also do a cream cheese dip, yogurt dip, something like that as well. Okay, so you guys are welcome to come up and try any of those things there. I'm going to put some lettuce leaves on that last plate. And one thing, too, I will say, people thought this was pretty funny yesterday. If all else fails, compost piles are awesome. Right? At least you're not throwing it away. If you already have a composter, certainly you can do that. Or if you can start one, all it takes is a couple cinder blocks and a pile of rotting vegetables, right? At least you're giving it back to the earth. So, but the bottom line is roll with the punches. You are going to get things that you love, things that you've never seen before and you're not really sure about, but staying flexible is certainly going to help with your CSA season. So hopefully you all will be able to come back to some of these other classes and learn some other sort of tips. I am structuring them a little bit different than I did last year. So you may have noticed this already, but each one will focus on a different meal. So June will be breakfast. We can talk about some ways to use veggies at breakfast. I am doing a dessert one in September, just so you know. So that could be interesting. All right. Well, any other final questions or anything that you hoped that I would talk about today and I didn't? Covered it all, huh? All right. Well, come on up, enjoy some of the food, and you can always ask me any questions, too, that you may not want to ask in front of everyone else. All right, so thanks, you guys.
Thank you.